Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the deep dive.
Hey there.
So we've got this stack of sources from one of our listeners. It's articles, research, all digging into, well, some really powerful figures in tech.
Yeah, it looks like the focus is mostly on people like Alex Karp, Peter Thiel, their companies, who they're connected to.
Exactly. And what these particular sources seem to suggest about their influence, their ideas.
Right, so the plan today really is to comb through this material you sent over, pull out the key bits.
Yeah, try and understand the picture these sources are painting about how technology, money, and state power all kind of connect.
Think of it as a shortcut, maybe, to getting up to speed on what this specific set of readings says about that whole dynamic.
It's definitely a look at how private tech gets, well, deeply embedded with government, right,
Yeah.
based on this material, and where these influential unelected folks fit in,
It's a really interesting collection of documents, offers quite a perspective.
for sure. Okay, so let's dive in. Where should we start? Maybe Alex Karp,
Hmm.
CEO of Palantir.
Sounds good. Palantir. Okay, so the origin story here, according to the sources, is pretty interesting. It was co-founded way back in 2004,
Right.
and Peter Thiel will definitely talk more about him. He bankrolled the first prototype.
Huh?
Then he brought in Alex Karp. They knew each other from Stanford Law School, apparently. Karp became CEO.
And getting that initial money,
Mhm.
the sources say it wasn't exactly easy. Like the usual VCs were hesitant.
Yeah, reportedly. Sequoia, Kleiner Perkins. They were skeptical, the material suggests. But a really key early investor was in QTEL.
That's the CIA's venture capital arm, right?
That's the one. That investment, plus money from Thiel himself and his founders fund, that's what got them started.
Wow. So the CIA's VC arm, right at the beginning, that definitely says something about their trajectory, doesn't it? Highlighted right here in the sources.
It really does, sort of sets the stage for their close ties to government interests.
Yeah, absolutely. And the sources have some colorful details about the company culture and Karp.
Oh, yeah. The Palo Alto HQ, nicknamed the Shire, apparently had a plastic ball pit, Nerf darts flying around, dogs allowed.
Very, very Silicon Valley, but maybe dialed up. Staff wearing branded gear, leaving toothbrushes. Sounds intense.
Totally. And Karp himself is described as, like, the most eccentric of Palantir's eccentrics.
Okay.
Lifelong bachelor, gets really obsessive about things, apparently. Rubik's Cubes, Qigong, Aikido, Jiu-Jitsu. The sources even say he'd sometimes put co-founders in, like holds.
Yeah, seriously.
Wow.
And his office cabinet has vitamins, goggles, hand sanitizer. Quite the mix.
It paints a picture, doesn't it? Then there's this Karp tube thing, internal videos for staff.
What, like company updates?
Sort of, but the
I-
topics mentioned are, well, greed, integrity, Marxism, pretty wide-ranging.
Marxism. Okay.
And there's a quote in here attributed to him. "The only time I'm not thinking about Palantir is when I'm swimming, practicing Qigong, or during sexual activity."
Right. Okay. So definitely a unique character, seems totally consumed by the company.
That's the impression these sources give, yeah. His personality seems really baked into the company's DNA.
Makes sense. But, okay, beyond the eccentricity, what does Palantir actually do, according to this material?
Right, the core business. Basically, it's a big data analysis company. The sources mention two main products, Gotham and Foundry.
Gotham and Foundry.
Gotham is mostly for government, intelligence, defense clients, helps them pull together different kinds of data for, say, counterterrorism analysis.
Okay.
Foundry is more for general data management, helping organizations, make sense of huge, messy data sets.
So it's all about integrating, managing, securing, analyzing data. Lots of data.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And their client lists in these sources, it shows how deep they are in some critical areas. U.S. intelligence community, Department of Defense.
For counterterrorism, yeah.
Also fraud investigators, cyber analysts. And there's a specific mention of helping the U.S. military in Afghanistan, predicting IED locations.
That's significant.
Yeah, and one source mentions a congressman complaining it was hard to get Palantir's tech adopted more widely, even though some soldiers apparently found it better than the Army's official system, DCGSA.
Interesting. And domestically, police departments.
Uh-huh. Helped build a license plate database in California, which sounds controversial, and a predictive policing program in New Orleans.
Predictive policing.
Yeah.
Always raises questions.
Definitely. They also help the federal government track COVID vaccines, manufacturing, distribution, all that.
Okay. And outside the U.S.?
Well, the sources mentioned their work with the NHS in the UK that faced protests, and a partnership with the Israel Defense Force, the IDF.
IDF. Providing services for war-related missions, it says here.
Right. And according to the sources, CARP's public support for Israel actually led to some employees quitting.
Okay, so given how involved they are in all these sensitive areas, government, military, police, it's no surprise there's criticism and controversy.
Absolutely. And the sources cover quite a bit. There's one really striking allegation in here suggesting Palantir proposed using cyber attacks and misinformation against journalists.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's serious. What else?
Well, there was that lawsuit back in 2016, Palantir suing the U.S. Army over a contract alleging bias,
Right.
and their contracts with IC U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. That's been a huge point of contention.
Okay, and how do the sources present Palantir's side of that? Because that's really controversial.
Yeah, it's important to get their response, as reported here. Palantir states they work with HSI Homeland Security investigations. That's the division dealing with, like, transnational crime, money laundering, human smuggling.
Okay, HSI, not the deportation side.
Exactly. They explicitly state, according to this material, they have no contract with ERO enforcement and removal operations. That's the part handling deportations, detention centers. They also deny any involvement in detention operations or the 2018 family separation policy. They reportedly view that policy negatively.
Got it. So they draw a clear line in their statement cited here.
They do. Their general defense, as presented in the sources, is, look, we provide software tools for data management. We're not an AI vendor. The clients own and control their data and what they do with it.
And they acknowledge they work with critical, sometimes imperfect institutions.
Yeah, and that they accept that responsibility and are prepared to address concerns. That's their stance, according to this.
Okay. What other criticisms pop up in the sources?
Being called complicit in IDF actions because of the services they provide. That led to protests.
Right.
Concerns about that predictive policing stuff, with one source suggesting some deals happen via backroom deals. Though Palantir apparently denies this, pointing to public reporting on their New Orleans work. And there was a proposal, mentioned in one source, to use DNA analysis for UK immigration decisions. That got slammed by scientists, apparently, as being basically junk science for pinpointing nationality.
Yikes.
And just a general point in the sources about the UK government not being very transparent about Palantir's role over there.
So it's clear from this material, Palantir is deeply embedded with state power. In critical areas, yes, but also surrounded by controversy and scrutiny.
Yeah, and a lot of that controversy seems tied to the fundamental questions around using powerful data tools within government.
Before we pivot, Karp's writing, The Technological Republic. What's the gist of that, based on the sources?
Well, the book apparently calls for, like, a renewed national purpose, more cooperation between government and tech.
Oh.
And he apparently criticizes Silicon Valley for focusing too much on consumer stuff, calls it the narrow and the trivial.
Interesting. So pushing for tech to tackle bigger, maybe national problems?
That seems to be the idea presented here, which kind of leads us into the broader ideologies.
Right. And that brings us squarely to Peter Thiel. He's all over these sources, not just with Palantir, but his own influence seems much more political.
Absolutely. Thiel is portrayed as a really central figure, co-founder of PayPal, started Clarium Capital, Founders Fund, early Facebook investor, and still chairman at Palantir. His resume, as laid out here, is extensive.
And his ideology. The sources paint a really distinct picture. He supposedly longs for a world where, quote, great men can act without constraints, government, regulation, redistributionist economics.
Yeah, that's how it's characterized in some of the material. A strong belief that radical new tech will just inherently be good for society. Almost takes it for granted, it seems.
And the life extension thing. That's fascinating. The sources say he's really focused on immortality.
Intensely. Doesn't see death as inevitable. Thinks calling it natural is just an excuse. Spends big money trying to, well, evade it. He's an Alcor cryonics client.
Cryonics, wow.
Yeah, and really into Aubrey de Grey's SENS research, the goal there is basically biological immortality.
So escaping the limits of biology itself, that's ambitious.
Hugely. And it connects to his critique of Silicon Valley, right? That famous Founders Fund line. We wanted flying cars, instead we got 140 characters. He thinks tech should be doing much bigger things.
Right, and he's apparently pretty down on universities, too.
Yeah. The sources describe him as seeing them as, like, intellectual wastelands. Too focused on diversity. Humanities are ridiculous. Sciences enforce dogmas. Pretty scathing views reported here.
So the picture from these sources is someone with a really powerful, maybe contrarian worldview, skeptical of institutions, pushing for radical tech.
Definitely. And that worldview clearly informs his political actions, which this material really digs into.
Like his support for Trump in 2016. The sources mention a big donation, even after the Access Hollywood tape.
Yep, $1.25 million, according to this. He also criticized Google, reportedly, for not selling AI to the U.S. military.
Okay. And he left the Meta board Facebook in 2022.
Right. Now, his relationship with Trump later on, the sources suggest he became somewhat disenchanted, didn't donate or talk much about the 2020 campaign. One source offers an interpretation of a conversation, suggesting Thiel kind of walked a careful line about the Trump years, and that maybe he didn't see the attempt to overturn the election as Trump's gravest offense. Again, that's presented as one interpretation here.
It's always tricky interpreting these things. Now, this is where one source gets pretty provocative, linking Thiel and others, Musk, Andreessen, are mentioned to something called end times fascism.
Yeah, that specific source makes that connection. It talks about Theobros destroying bureaucracy, replacing people with chatbots, getting rid of enemies. It's a very strong claim from that particular piece of material.
And that same source claims Thiel compared Greta Thunberg to the Antichrist, warning about a message of peace and safety.
That's the claim reported in that one source, yes. It's crucial we flag that this is one source's specific and quite loaded interpretation, trying to frame certain tech ideologies. Another source uses keywords like anarcho-capitalism when discussing Thiel, but in the context of it potentially being a successor to colonialism. So you see different labels and framings used across the material.
Right. Important to distinguish between reporting what the sources say and endorsing the view. But these aren't just abstract theories, right? The sources point to concrete connections, like Rivada Space Networks.
Exactly. This satellite tech startup, the sources say it drew investment and lobbying from the highest conservative circles.
Names like Karl Rove, Mike Pompeo, who joined the board, Jeb Bush. Even Democrat Martin O'Malley is listed.
A real mix, yeah. Thiel's own investment isn't disclosed, but the sources stress his name carried power in negotiations. The DoD is also an investor. Newt Gingrich lobbied for them.
So you have this company described as highly politically connected, raising a lot of money, expanding fast, even before its satellites are up.
That's the picture painted here. A clear example, based on these sources, of tech, big money, high-level politics, and military interest all converging, propelled in part by the names involved, like Thiel's.
And that dynamic seems really clear in the relationship between Thiel and J.D. Vance, as detailed in these sources.
Absolutely. The material calls it a long collaborative relationship. Says it really helped Vance's career, from VC work to the Senate.
And suggests Vance became more sympathetic to Trump after meeting Thiel.
That's reported here, yeah. And Thiel's financial backing was huge, around $15 million for Vance's 2022 Ohio Senate race. Described in the sources as record-breaking, the largest single donation ever to one Senate candidate.
$15 million, wow. And Thiel helped bring in other donors, too?
Apparently so. The sources also connect Vance's jobs back to Thiel, like heading Steve Case's Rise of the Rest Fund, which had many big investors listed, and working at Mithril Capital, co-founded by Thiel. That's the firm the FBI reportedly probed in 2019 over potential financial issues.
Okay. And the sources track Vance's political evolution, to give context.
Yeah, they note he was seen as a moderate Republican back in 2017, had praised Clinton Obama, was very critical of Trump, initially called him dangerous, another opioid.
So a real shift described here towards populism on trade, criticizing free trade, prioritizing the nuclear family over free markets.
Exactly. Warning about things like socialism, fascism if the corporate world isn't challenged. Criticizing old-school Republican economics, Milton Friedman stuff, tax cuts for failing workers. He even criticized GOP efforts to repeal Obamacare, according to this.
But then later, aligns with Trump, downplays January 6th, gets his endorsement.
That's what the sources indicate. Other positions mentioned include criticizing GOP tax cuts, but supporting the 2011 Ryan budget, which cut Social Security, Medicare, supporting higher taxes for people without kids.
That's specific.
Accusing the IRS and Biden admin of weaponizing government against conservatives. Accusing Chinese grad students of IP theft. Defending Amy Chua. Worrying about low U.S. fertility rates.
And that last point drew criticism for echoing great replacement theories, one source notes.
Yeah, that criticism is mentioned in the material. And finally, accusing Democrats on the left of basically being okay with big tech because corporate power gets used against Trump and his supporters.
Okay, so if we pull all these threads together, from Palantir's deep state integration to Thiel's ideology, his money, his network, his political backing of figures like Vance, What's the overall picture these sources present?
Well, collectively, the sources really seem to suggest that you have these incredibly powerful tech figures.
Hmm.
They hold strong, sometimes radical beliefs about society and technology.
Right.
And they're not just on the sidelines. They're deeply involved with the state's most sensitive operations through their companies. And they're directly shaping the political landscape through funding, networks, and influence.
So a picture where unelected tech billionaires wield significant influence over state power, over political direction, based entirely on what's reported in this material you shared.
Yeah, the lines get really blurry, according to these sources, between private companies, national security, political movements.
Yeah.
It all seems intertwined.
So reflecting on all these pieces, just based on the material provided, what really stands out? We've covered Karp and Palantir's government work, Thiel's worldview and political reach, the Vance connection.
I think it's that glimpse the sources provide into how private tech becomes fundamental to state power and how the ideologies, the money of the people building that tech and then flow back into the political system, influencing it at really high levels.
This deep dive, drawing just from these documents you sent, definitely leaves you with some big questions about wealth, tech, unelected influence, state power, all of it.
Absolutely. And maybe here's something for you, the listener, to mull over as you digest this. Based purely on what these sources present, how do you personally weigh the benefits? The benefits of governments having access to advanced technology against the concerns raised here about the influence and the specific ideologies of the people and companies behind that tech?
Yeah, it's a tough balance, isn't it? Something these sources definitely push you to think about.